Yeah, we now find ourselves in one of Hamburg's many canals. This is actually very much a canal and bridge city. It has about 2,400 bridges, which is actually more than Amsterdam and Venice combined. So many people often think of those cities as the cities of canals and bridges, but they'd be wrong. It's actually this city, Hamburg. Now, this canal used to be the main port of Hamburg until about 1870, when Hamburg officially joined Germany. Now, this area, as I said, was the port, and all of these little buildings used to be factories and warehouses. You can actually see on some of them still, they have little tiny reminders of the cranes that used to exist on them. Now, there's only about 10 of these left in the city, and a lot of people, again, it will remind them of Amsterdam. Amsterdam also has a similar thing, but Amsterdam actually has 300 or 400 of these left, whereas Hamburg only has 10. Now, as I said, in 1870, the port moved as ships had gotten bigger. They used to just send small barges and little boats up this river and load them directly from the warehouses onto the boats. But eventually commerce became too big and they started using bigger boats. So they moved the port to those brick buildings over there, known as the Spijkerstadt. Now the port existed there for another about 100 years until again there was another advent in technology and they invented the container ships in 1962. When that happened, they used vastly larger boats. So this was no longer large enough, and they again moved the port over across the river. I can point that out to you when we get a little bit further on. Now, I bring you to this particular location not just because it was a port, but because there was a big, massive event that started right here. If you look over to this building, underneath that window, there's a small sign that says Zum Brandanfang. What that means is to the fire's beginning. Now, I had mentioned earlier that there was a massive fire in Hamburg in 1842, and this is the building where it started. This fire actually destroyed about 25% of the inner city and raged for about 4 days before they were able to put it out. Now, as I said, the fire started in this building. This building used to be a cigar factory. What was next to it was an alcohol warehouse. Next to that was a carpet factory. And next to that was a paper warehouse. As you can see, there was quite a grouping of highly flammable buildings filled with highly flammable objects. Now, the fire was started on the evening of May 5th in 1842, and they believe that it was a fire started intentionally. They had found some evidence later that made them believe that, as well as in that afternoon, a man who had worked at this factory was fired after being there for 40 years. They don't actually know that this man was the culprit who set fire to the building, but it's kind of suspicious that the day he gets fired, he burns the building down.
Oh,
Now,
the building is burnt.
Yeah, the building was burnt down.
Yeah.
Now, this man was never seen from again, but there is several suspicion as to what happened to him. They believe two things, they're both kind of legends. One is that the man fled and he ran to Niklaus Church, you can see over there. And on his way he tripped, fell, and hit his head, and there he perished. The other legend is that he fled to a boat, got his leg caught in a rope, and again fell into the water and died. So as you can see, all of these legends, they kind of end with him not really making it. Whether that's karma or people just wanting to have closure to that, we're not really sure. So now, as I said, fire started in the evening. It was noticed by a night patrolman. He ran to get help as the fire started to burn brighter and brighter inside this building. Next door was the alcohol warehouse, and the man who worked there was actually living there as well. Now, when he realized that there was a fire next door, he looked around him and he saw that he was surrounded by giant vats of different alcohols, which, as we know, are quite flammable. And he began to panic, fearing that his entire building would go up. So he started to take these jugs and barrels of alcohol over to the window and dump them into this canal. And he kept doing this, dumping more and more and more alcohol into the river. Finally, the firemen showed up. Back in that time, they did not have a modern plumbing system where they could just plug it into a hydrant. They in fact had to take the water pumped out of this very canal, which by that time had become maybe a little bit more alcohol than it was actually water. These firefighters started to spray the burning building with what they believed to be water. Unfortunately for them, it did not really work as planned. They were quite confused as to why what they were spraying was burning hotter and hotter. Now, of course, this did not help stop the fire and helped spread it instead. Eventually, it did spread from building to building to building, even catching the canal itself on fire.
Oh.
Because, of course, as I said, it had lots of alcohol in it. Now, the fire began to spread more and more, with the first main building that it reached being St. Nicholas Church itself over there, which was partially destroyed in the fire. The fire burned for about 3 more days, and it continued to spread. And they began to really panic on the 3rd day, as it was just kind of unstoppable. Around this time, they had a technique called fire blocks, where they would demolish an area of the city in order to prevent the fire from spreading over it. Unfortunately, this area where they needed to put the fire block was right where the old rat house was. So they spent all day clearing out the rat house, taking all the old records and everything out. Fortunately, this took too long, and by the time they actually demolished it, the fire had reached it and just merely engulfed it and kept moving on. On the 4th day, firemen from a nearby city had finally reached Hamburg, and with the additional manpower as well as new technology, they were able to gain control of the city. Now, fortunately, by that time, about 25% of the inner city had been destroyed by this fire. Many people had fled, though casualties were relatively small, as people were able to escape the blaze. Some people did die, but not too many. Eventually, the city was able to rebuild, though it took 50 years for them to actually rebuild the rat house. As I said, this one was built in 1897, and this is the one that followed immediately after the one that was burnt down. So now I'm going to let you guys take some pictures if you'd like. It's actually a fairly pretty view of the bridge over there. I'll be waiting further up. When you guys all come to me, we're going to move on to the Hafen City and the Philharmonic, which is the last stop on the tour. We're going to stop on a bridge just briefly so I can point some things out, and then we're going to wrap it up. Thank you.